This is a short review of Nicolas Winding Refn's Only God Forgives, a film that has received a very polarized reception. Some people loved it, but others, including Brad Jones, aka the Cinema Snob, despised it. I'm somewhere in the middle. Ryan Gosling stars as Julian, a martial arts instructor and drug dealer in Thailand whose brother is murdered in a revenge killing. A cop, played by Vithaya Pansringarm, was involved in the killing, so Julian's mother, Kristin Thomas, pressures Julian into avenging his brother by killing the cop. If I were to describe Only God Forgives by analogy to other movies and conventions, the film is essentially a brooding neo-noir slasher movie with elements of Mulholland Drive and Stanley Kubrick, mostly in the soundtrack and the prominent use of hallway shots. And that mixture isn't as good, or as bad, depending on how you look at it, as it sounds. The film is neo-noir in its dark, moody cinematography and its characterization, as the cast is populated entirely by despicable people. Julian is an anti-hero at most, being the only person with a shred of decency, as he let the killer of his brother go because his brother raped and murdered the man's teenage daughter, and Julian refused to let the cop's daughter be killed. Julian's mother, on the other hand, is a ruthless ice queen who treats her son like garbage. As for the cop, I think Only God Forgives qualifies as a slasher movie of sorts because the cop is a sociopath who uses a sword to maim or execute his victims/criminals in gory ways. A scene of the cop torturing one of the mother's associates by pinning his limbs with spikes and slicing his eyes and ears is particularly sickening and hard to sit through. There are some incredibly hard-hitting moments in Only God Forgives, the music and visuals are excellent, and Scott Thomas and Pansringarm are engagingly abhorrent in their roles. The tonal whiplash from the corny karaoke scenes is also justified, as they make the gut-wrenching violence more shocking and highlight how normal the cop thinks his life is. But Only God Forgives is overall a fascinating failure. Calling Julian an anti-hero at most was a loaded description, as even though he is the anti-hero main character, his mother and the cop are more interesting and better acted. Gosling's performance is flat, blank, and dull, and he spends most of the film speaking in a monotone or staring ahead with disinterest. Gosling was great in The Place Beyond the Pines, one of my favorite movies of 2013, but his acting in Only God Forgives is terrible. Julian is also a total cipher with hardly any identity, much like the other characters. As many other critics, including Chris Stuckman, have pointed out, the characters are metaphorical in nature. Julian represents morality, as the ostensible good guy, his mother represents vengeance, and the cop could be taken to embody both death and a perverse form of justice. But the characters feel like basic, underdeveloped entities, and though we can intellectualize them, we don't really know them, and thus can't care or invest ourselves in them. In my recent review of Falling Down, I brought up a wide variety of morally questionable or repugnant protagonists in my rundown of why I like antiheroes. In most cases, you do on some level want karma to catch up with them and punish them, but you are also intrigued by their personality and exploits and want them to continue out of dark fascination, possibly in spite of yourself. This kind of cognitive dissonance is a large part of what makes anti-heroes exciting. But in Only God Forgives, your interest in the bulk of the characters stems merely from wanting all of them to die, and that's not enough. Although it does further support the film's status as a slasher movie. The film is also very slow and languid, and is padded out by many surreal dream sequences that don't have much of a point. Ultimately, despite the great cinematography and music, Kristin Thomas and Pansringarm's strong performances, and that cool fight scene toward the end, Only God Forgives is too slow and leisurely paced, the characters are too basic, and star Ryan Gosling's acting is too emotionless for me to really get into it. Only God Forgives is just very insubstantial, and earns 2.5 stars out of 5. Thanks for watching. Cheers.